official time has arrived. Welcome all to Corporate and Strategic for today, Committee of the Whole. Firstly, Peter, could I prevail on you to lead us in karakia?
Yep.
Me karakia koutou. Whakatakata hou ki te uru, whakatakata hou ki te tonga, kia mā, kina kina ki uta, kia mā, tata ki tai. Hihi aki ana ki tata, he tio, he uka, he hau, si he, mauri ora. Now, we've already had housekeeping this morning, but there's been a bit of to and fro, so I'll go through it anyway, just for safety. This meeting is being live streamed on Council's Facebook page and recorded for viewing at a later date on our YouTube channel. In an earthquake, drop cover, hold. The shaking is long and strong. When the shaking subsides, leave the building through the nearest exit. Proceed immediately towards Napier Hill along Dalton Street to Tiffin Park, continuing up the steps to Cameron Road. If an emergency alarm sounds, immediately evacuate the building through the nearest exit and go to the assembly area on the grass. Over to my left, Dalton and Bordia Streets, emergency exits clearly signposted on the doors. Whare Paku down the hallway, outside the chamber entrance. Do I have any conflict of interest declarations, please? There are none, thank you. I have apologies for Thompson Hokianga, Councillor Hokianga. Any other apologies? There are none. Do we have to move? Yes, mover and a seconder for the apologies. Councillor Van Beek and Councillor McIntosh. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, so confirmation of the minutes. Those were circulated just this morning, so I will give you a moment to catch up with those. So can I have a mover and a seconder for confirming the minutes of our previous meeting on the 19th, please? Give you time. I would like to, but no.
Chair, could I suggest we kick these over to the next meeting? Can we do that?
Do we need to?
Well, it's quite hard to read 25 pages.
So what you'll find is that about 24 pages of those, or 23, are actually just an attachment for the presentation that was there anyway. So I'm happy to move the minutes if I can get a seconder. Councillor Williams, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, move on to our single decision item for today. Look, we are just looking at the program. We are here until 11:30, but we do, councillors, we do have a further workshop at 12:30. And the reason for highlighting that is twofold. One is that we're not intending to stop for morning tea, and two is we do have time, so don't feel pressured. Don't want you to waste staff time where you're own, but we do have time to go through our financial reporting and our organisational performance. So, yeah, let's do a decent job on that today. Thank you. So, if staff can lead us through, Katrina, and we have our harbour master here as well. You're about boats. Thank you.
Yes, will do. Good morning, councillors, members. To my right, those of you who have not met our harbour master, this is Adrian Wright, and to his right is our financial accountant, James Park. I've probably got his title wrong, my apologies if I did. Some of you may recall that last year, following an audit by Port Harbour Marine Safety team, doing an audit on our code and how we interact with the port and our harbour master functions, and also as from an audit of our oil spill response functions from Maritime New Zealand, it was identified that Hawke's Bay Regional Council is the only region with a harbour master with an extensive coastline and inland waters that are navigable without any on-water capability. And it was a significant risk for this organisation that we weren't able to mitigate. And as a response to that, the Risk and Audit Committee asked us to go away and identify how we would mitigate that risk. At that meeting, we advised them that we were looking at the purchase of a vessel in order to undertake our functions appropriately. As a consequence, these two gentlemen have worked for that year investigating options, have spoken with almost all of the region's harbour masters, identifying what resources they had, and have a proposal now in front of you today. The reason the proposal is in front of you is not in so much to ask, can we buy a vessel? It's how can we buy a vessel? It's not currently scheduled in our annual plan or long-term plan as a capital item. And so for unbudgeted capital, it's prudent to bring decisions like this to you. In addition, we are obviously, as you will read in the paper, looking to use the enforcement revenue reserve to fund that, as well as fees and charges, so as to avoid any impact on rates. So essentially the proposal before you is to buy not only a vessel, but also a jet ski, and we'll explain why, but to use the enforcement revenue fund to do so, and fees and charges, and that it will essentially, as the term is said, wash its own face without ratepayer revenue. That's as a consequence, or that's as a result of, and I'd like to point out the work that Adrian has done over the past couple of years since he has been here, in terms of lifting the fees and charges of the harbour masters' functions and maritime safety functions of this org. When we got here 5 years ago, there was very little to zero revenue that was coming in for that function, despite the fact that a lot of it is for private benefit through, or not private benefit, but it can be targeted to the port operations, the inner harbour, and a multitude of other activities such as jet ski registrations. So as a consequence, the revenue coming into that function has significantly been enhanced over the last 3 years. So that's work that the team have done. That's a general introduction. I'll pass over to the team, other than to say that the enforcement revenue spending policy was also introduced some years ago now, I can't quite, in 2020 something, 3. And the idea about that was to take the proceeds of enforcement revenue and put them into a reserve fund to enable the spending of those reserves to benefit the environment where we have issues relating to pollution incidents. The inner harbour coastal marine area has, particularly in Ahuriri, but particularly in the inner harbour, has seen significant pollution incidents in the last 5 years, so some of the most recorded. And so I think there's a direct benefit there. In addition, our marine oil spill response team are intending on using the vessel as much as the harbour master for our response in that regard. And so it is in line with that spending policy. But I'll take questions about that later if you have any. I'm going to pass over to these two.
Morning. So yeah, just following up on what Katrina said, we've seen a significant increase in the frequency and severity of maritime incidents around the region. Some of you will probably also have seen things in the media and social media for people offending. We've had collisions, groundings, boat fires, all of those things that you've seen in the report. And we're in a position now where it's somewhat untenable for us to continue this way. All right, we need to have on-water assets, we need to maintain a presence, and our absence is in many ways a catalyst for some of the issues that's happening, right? The issues are exacerbated by the fact that we're not there. And we have people offending in a variety of ways. In addition to that, we're unable to respond effectively and efficiently to marine oil spill and different pollution incidents that arise. So the proposal is essentially to ensure that we bolster our capabilities. As Katrina mentioned earlier, we are the only region that cannot respond. And it comes down to the fact that we have to be able to demonstrate to our communities, right, that we are proactive and reactive. We're there on the water, we're engaging and educating, and when necessary, we will also enforce as required, because aside from being custodians of the environment, we're also regional regulators, right? The inability to be on the rivers, the inland waterways, is a pretty serious issue. We had a meeting, Peter Eden was there at the time with iwi around some of the pollution issues on the access of the rivers and the things that were going on with jet boaters going up and so on. We cannot be on the rivers ourselves. And that's a significant problem. And that is what is encouraging the reckless behavior, the pollution, and the side issues that come along with that. So the proposal is one that will enable our council to be perceived in the right way. We will be effective and efficient with how we handle these incidents and hold up to scrutiny from ratepayers, the public, Maritime New Zealand, Transport Accident Investigation Commission. Something will happen. That's the mentality that we have to have, right? There will be something that happens. When we have these incidents happening more often, it's a symptom of a larger problem, right? It is the normalization of deviance. When you have a bunch of incidents happening, at the end of it, there's going to be a big issue. And we have to be prepared for that. So that is essentially what the paper is about, all right?
Can I just ask James to talk through the financing of the two vessels, please?
Kia ora, councillors. Thank you very much. So through you, Chair, the funding mix that we believe we've put together is the most prudent and efficient use of funds that we have available to us. As Katrina outlined, using the Enforcement Revenue Reserve for just such an instance. We are taking a part of that reserve, then also utilising that with loan funds to spread the cost of the vessel purchase over the lifetime of the vessel. In this case, we're expecting it to be around 20 years. Now, by spreading that cost with that funding mix, that will allow us to provide a zero impact to ratepayers for the need to fund any purchase up front. And then the initial running costs on an annual basis will also be paid for by the both cost avoidance that we have by no longer needing to hire vessels externally, and then also the revenue that we will receive from other TLAs and other private organisations which will be able to utilise the vessel that we will have as an asset. That also applies for the personal watercraft as well. The revenue that we receive from fees and charges will cover the running cost of that, and so will have no impact to ratepayers at all. And that's really the crux of how we designed that funding. So this would have again, just to reiterate, no impact to ratepayers. And just sort of one other point, just to cover, while we expect revenues to increase, this is definitely not designed to be a money grab or anything like that. Unfortunately, compliance comes through revenue generation for us, and so that is the function that we are obviously providing as the regulator. So for me, thanks.
Over to take questions.
Councillor Rodley, and then Councillor Sears.
Thank you, Jane. Very good explanation. I wonder, at the risk of stating the obvious, but giving you an opportunity to speak to the different functions and requirements of having what I'm imagining is a more significant vessel and the jet ski option, and how that enables you to do your role better.
Yeah, 100%. So the vessel itself, the boat, will enable us to conduct operations in the coastal marine environment. So basically from the coast outwards to sea, and some areas like the inner harbour, right? The jet ski, the personal watercraft, allows us to conduct operations in inland waterways. So we have lakes and rivers, the inner harbour, we have restricted areas and shallow depths that a boat can't get to. And sometimes we need a craft that can be deployed quickly, highly maneuverable, can operate in shallow depths, can transport, recover, and deploy equipment for pollution response in a timely manner. In the paper itself, there was an incident that was highlighted where a vessel had caught fire. At the time, we had no way to get onto the water, so I showed up along with Fens and police. They did their part, but myself and pollution response were there. We needed to deploy booms, utilize a skimmer to get the pollutants off the water, and we had no way of doing it. A jet ski would have been perfect in that instance. What ended up happening then is there was a member of the public who was a kayaker who was passing by, and we had to be passing booms to him, and he was kayaking around to get the spill contained. So that's the type of thing where we need something that is maneuverable, quick, can be deployed reasonably quickly, and you don't need much infrastructure per se to deploy a jet ski. Whether you're going up a river, if you're going into a lake, if you're going anywhere, you can deploy quickly, recover, and get the job done. That's the main reason why we need the flexibility of both. That answers your question?
I think so, but can I just test with you, does it also give you the ability to deliver the same functions further across the region, i.e. Mohaka River, Wairoa, Mahia?
Yeah, when I mention rivers, I'm speaking about all of them. Naruroro, Tutaikuri, Mohaka, Clive. We get reports all the time, not just about incidents in terms of maritime safety and pollution response, but also hazards. So slash coming on the rivers when there's a significant, rain event. And we have river users. We have a very active community of jet boaters, jet skiers, kayakers, waka-ama, everybody's on the rivers. And then we have people gathering kai from the rivers as well. So when these things happen and we have hazards, we have to be able to respond, right? Go up there and get what we need to get off the rivers and pull it to the riverbank, deal with it, secure it. So that's a major part of it as well. So when I say rivers, it's region-wide.
I have another question, or have I used it?
Yeah, no, carry on.
Thank you. Katrina, you spoke about the reserve that had been set up as a result of those fees and charges. In the purchase of, this is probably for you, in the purchase of this vessel and the ongoing costs of keeping it functional, does that deplete that reserve? Is there a one-off thing that will drop the level, or is it something that will? Could you just talk to that?
Yeah, thank you through you, Chair. So the reserve currently has a balance of around 600,000. We're planning to only use around 300,000 of that to partially fund the vessel, along with the loan funding as mentioned. So we'll still have 300,000 balance sitting in there. And I would say that as we do see the revenue coming in from the use of the vessel over that lifetime, we will obviously be able to direct any surplus funds back into a reserve, which will then help pay for the new vessel purchase in 20 years, along with the disposal cost of the current one.
Councillor Sears, and then Councillor Williams, and Councillor McIntosh, and Councillor Foley, and Councillor Indeed. I think I'll be the top and Peter. So I think we'll just go with one question each.
I have one question. Possibly a silly question. With the RM reforms, I'm wondering if there could be a change to our responsibility.
Through you, Chair, there has been no signal of any change to those responsibilities.
Williams.
Yeah, thank you. The question I was going to ask was what sort of boat you get for 600 grand, but there are some specifications here. I'd like to have a boat like that. But the fees and charges that would basically fund the internal loan, as I understand it, who are those levied to, for what, and on what basis?
Okay, so the fees and charges that we have in the Harbour Master's office are all commercial. So our partners, regional partners, and our stakeholders are Napier City Council, who pay us basically for maritime safety response, and Napier Port, and they fund the maritime operation side of things. In addition to that, we charge for permits. So any vessel, any waterborne vessel, so any vessel that's sitting in the port that needs to undertake dive operations, hot work, permits, so basically welding, grinding, anything that generates heat, or immobilizations where they need to basically shut off the engines, pull things apart, do repairs. We charge them a fee each time they do that. In addition to that, last financial year, I incorporated an anchorage fee. So I designated 10 specific anchorages in the Hawke's Bay region where vessels who are stopping here and anchoring, they pay us $1 per meter per day or part thereof while sitting in our waters. So all those fees come to us in the Harbour Master's office.
Do they need to go up, the fees and charges?
No, so we don't need to increase any fees at all, either to the commercial operators like the shipping companies or Napier Port or NCC.
Thank you.
Councillor McIntosh.
Did I hear you say there's 600,000 in reserves?
Correct.
So it says 490 or something in the paper, doesn't it? But,
Oh, sorry, that may be slightly.
anyway, my question was, that's actually the same as the price of the boat, isn't it? So why don't we use more of that or all of that and not borrow?
So through you, Chair, some of the reserve is set aside for Wairoa. So there is a portion there, I think slightly over $50,000 as a result of the prosecution we took there. We need to hold that. That cannot be used other than for the purposes of up in Wairoa. So we need to set that aside. Other than that, I'm going to...
Really, it was to not deplete the reserve entirely. Reserves are there for a reason. We could do that, but we thought it was a more conservative approach to utilise the loan funding mechanism. Again, given that this would still not have any cost to ratepayers, that we could fund it through the fees and charges and additional revenue coming in. So it's really what we thought to be the most prudent approach.
Could I just note, Chair, that we've got strong revenue streams and there's a lot of cost saving with it as well. So we're being very conservative.
Councillor Foley.
Just congratulate the team up the front here for bringing this proposal, significant numbers but no cost to ratepayer, so well done. Just a couple of questions I'll ask in both cases I'm not allowed to come back to. 11 metre boat obviously won't be a trailer boat, so you've got some berthage charges there. Do we already own a berth, or is there a capital cost to that at the start as well? And when you talk about hiring up till now, presumably these boats are coming with some sort of crews, and so do we, like Coast Guard, I assume, comes with its own crew. Do we need to employ any extra people to man these vessels, or is that all within house capable?
No, great questions. So the first question, with regards to berthage, our two options are berthage through Napier City Council, and they're welcoming us to have a berth there, because the reality is that it would complement their business as well, having that shared asset. The other option is a sailing club, who have also indicated that they would like to give us a berth space. So those two options are totally fine. With regards to your second question, we don't need extra crew. So myself and Kim Bjarnason, who is the Deputy Harbour Master sitting behind us there, we're both capable, we're both qualified and trained. And for all these operations, a two-man crew is more than enough, in addition to whoever else will be coming along. So when you get hired out for certain operations, you would have a marine scientist coming with you if they're doing water quality. You'd have members of the asset management group if they're doing buoy deployment or recovery. So there would be members of the teams tagging along as well. That's why the boat would need to be in survey for up to, let's say, 8 people, depending on what's happening. In addition to that, you'd probably see Coast Guard gets contracted for a variety of things, dealing with wildlife, dealing with science and that type of thing. And they also bring members of the organizations that have hired them. So 2 people would be perfectly fine to do that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bake.
Yeah, my other councillors are allowed to ask several questions. I'll just keep it to one. The kayak example is not a good one, because all of a sudden, instead of actually a jet ski, you'll become a kayak, because it's a lot cheaper to employ a kayak than not. But anyway, that's okay. You think that the enforcement revenue may reduce because we'll have a better presence on and better education through a presence on the water?
Absolutely. That is statistically the case across all the regions. The reality is that we've all been there, if you're on the road and you see some type of regulator, whether it be police or whatever, just that presence is somewhat of a deterrent for conducting yourself in a way which is untoward. So the fact that we're not on the water engaging, we do engage with our communities through safer boating courses. We have giveaways that we do, and we're very present with the different clubs. We have quarterly harbour users group meetings, but all of them highlight the fact that they are not happy with the fact that we're not on the water. So we get complaints, we have a series of incident reports, we have an incident register, and all of that will be rectified or remedied in some way by being out there, being able to liaise with people, engage, educate, and when necessary, enforce. Recently, there was a posting of a jet ski user who was, speeding in the harbour. That's somewhat of a regular occurrence, right? And as I said before, our absence is exacerbating the issue.
But through you, Chair, I think even with that reduced revenue enforcement, we will still have enough surplus from our hireage fees from the TLAs, etc., that will cover all of the running costs. So we don't expect that to, again, ever actually impact the ratepayer from need to fund.
And through to you, I might just qualify slightly. I think over time we will see enforcement revenue absolutely decline. I think in the first instance, as we've seen with other enforcement programs that we've taken, let's say such as our burning campaign, in the initial phases, you do actually see an increase in revenue from enforcement. The team are doing an exceptional job at engaging, educating, and encouraging good behaviour. That has to go alongside enforcement. It's not that we're out there taking a hard line in enforcement. We do all 4 E's in terms of our compliance program. So I think you'll see in the initial stages, you might see an increase, but gradually over time, the aim is that we see that come down.
Oh, well, kia ora. Thank you for that. Just going on from Di's question, what would your response rate be to get up to Wairoa and Mahia, given the leisurely activities that take place up there and bad behaviours?
Yeah, so we have in place pretty much a planned approach to how often we go to the various regions. So we go up to Mahia. The last time we were there it was a couple months ago. We had a pretty big turnout for safer boating training. So we put on a 2-day weekend course. And we're very tied in with the local community, the fishing club, all the different contractors there, the cray fishermen, etc. We try to visit the regions as often as we can. And in the event of an incident, the reality here is we are, 3 hours away? So it's a matter of getting in a vehicle and heading there. And for serious instances, for example, there was one issue a couple of years ago where a boat, the Gitan 2, had actually washed up ashore. You're probably familiar with it. Yeah. And our response team, which included the pollution response team, was pretty much onto it straight away. Right? And then we liaise with Pride Contracting to get everything recovered. So when these incidents happen, we are prompt and we respond as expeditiously as we can. Right? Yeah. Hopefully that answers the question.
That does, but just supplementary to that, in terms of the monitoring, because we've spoken about response a lot. So in terms of the jet ski monitoring of the rivers and lagoons, what are you monitoring other than pollution?
So we're monitoring safety on the waterways, right? So maritime safety. Pollution is somewhat coupled with safety, because if you have less people colliding and doing reckless things, you have less likelihood of oil and pollutants ending up in the water, right? So the two things are maritime safety and maritime pollution. And that is also linked, obviously, to reckless behavior, disregard for the rules and regulations. We have rules of how you should be operating on the waterways. And if we can't manage and monitor that, that's what leads to these incidents and these trends accumulating over time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Peter. Yeah, I've just got 2 questions. One, you mentioned about jet boats in there, and I suppose just in relation to the whole the river, just that monitoring, and with that previous work that we've done with the police and Department of Conservation in regards to those jet boats, is there a need to look at one of those purchases in regards to managing the rivers or waterways, because those jet boats are accessing, if you look at the Ngararoa or the Moaka, it gives you a better reach. And then if you look at this, when the cyclone came, obviously those jet boats rescued a lot of people. So I just wonder if that was factored in the equation. So that's my first question, because I know we've been dealing in regards to yourselves, in regards to the Mohawk, there's been a lot of issues done on the Hawa, from the tree blocking the river and obviously with the jet boats. So yeah, has that been considered as one of the options?
Through you, Chair, can I just clarify, are you asking have we considered the purchase of a jet boat?
Well,
Is
yeah.
that similar to the inflatables that we've got going on up there?
Yeah.
That's more expensive. That's a lot more expensive. So in terms of a cost to benefit ratio, a $26,000 jet ski allows us to deploy and recover quickly, transport equipment. It has the power to remove hazards. We can maneuver in tight spaces. If we're looking at jet boats, it's a lot more money. And if you're looking at something like a RIB, like a rigid inflatable boat, it's $80,000 up to $100,000. So in terms of cost effectiveness, it wouldn't probably be prudent for us to purchase a jet boat ourselves, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, because it just, we're talking about it out on the Moana, on the ocean, but then what about the river? Obviously the rivers are getting a lot more access, and then we're dealing, I suppose from a Manapōwhenua perspective, we're dealing a lot more with yourself in regards to those issues.
So the jet ski would allow us to do everything that a jet boat would allow us to do as well for a cheaper price, and also have additional benefits. So we will be on the rivers. That's the plan. The plan is to have the jet ski. We can launch, we can recover, we can remove hazards, we can maneuver, we can monitor the use and the management of the waterways, especially the Mohawk, which is quite popular, as you know. And when there are events on that's organized by Jet Boating New Zealand and other organizations, we can be there as a patrol, because we often get complaints sometimes that even though we've approved an event to take place on the river, the event organizers sometimes might be speeding or doing something that they shouldn't be doing. So we can be conducting patrols as well. So it's a matter of having a presence, and the jet ski would allow us to do that in a way which is financially prudent.
And just a second question was just, it was good to hear about the education programs in there. And I suppose when you're enforcing and doing compliance, it's like the police, if you can educate people, and I suppose for a lot of our whānau that are going out on the Moana, it'd be good to time with yourselves so we could run some of those programs to try and, just to educate them so they don't become a statistic of enforcement. So it'd be good to talk to you later on and then
100%.
set something out for them.
100%. And just in response to that, just quickly, we liaise with iwi as well as other regional partners, different fishing clubs and boating clubs and so on, and that is what prompted us to start doing these programs, and they will continue year on year. The idea was to have 3 in the different areas, so one in Mahia, one kind of in Napier, one in Porongahau. The organization for one in Porongahau, Puriri, was hard because we weren't finding a suitable location to house all the people, the participants. But we got really good responses from those courses. People were really happy. And quite a lot of incidents that happened. There was an incident where a guy had 3 people had fallen out of a boat off Waipatiki, and they almost drowned, and they survived. And the person who survived was actually wearing a waterproof cell phone bag, a dry bag, and that allowed him to call for help. And that's some of the stuff we cover in these courses.
And I suppose I'll commit, because I co-chair a customary kaitiaki group, which goes from Mahia all down Porongahau. And I'd commit to organise it, because I see it as safety and in compliance, and that'll be, I suppose, the people you're going to deal with that'll give you grief when you try and enforce anything. But if we can work proactively, I'm sure I can get some people from that group to participate.
Come and talk to you, Peter.
Okay.
Fantastic. Question. I've got a couple of questions, financial ones that we haven't traversed yet. One is, what level of assurance do we have that these third parties are going to subscribe to our boat?
Okay.
So that funding stream. So that's the first one. And the second one is probably for James, just around the decision not to depreciate the asset. So thank you.
So just briefly, and I'm going to hand over to Adrian, because he's had the conversations with the TLAs. In short, we can't bind them, absolutely not, but we're not reliant on it either. I'll pass over to you to talk about the
So we've had discussions with NCC, the different managers. So I can mention names: Andrew Gass, Joel Vanderborn from Panpak, Wakefield, Highland Baker from Hastings District Council, they all have skin in the game. They have sewage outfall pipes that they need to monitor. They have different science, water quality, variety of testing that they do. And they've all pretty much said that they would really like for us to have that shared resource. The reality here is that they're using contractors that aren't providing, I guess, a reliable service for them in many ways. And that is causing them a little bit of grief in some way. So having that shared resource that we could use, and that ties into insurance, the powers to do certain things, that would be ideal for everyone. So we've had their full support the whole time. And they've actually asked us to keep them updated with what's happening. The second question, I guess James can answer about the depreciation.
So our typical behaviour when we depreciate an asset here at council, you write down that asset over its lifetime, in order to build up a replacement cost for that. And so if you think about it, you pay for the asset up front, and then you also pay for the replacement kind of at the same time, so it's a bit like a double whammy. In this case, we will obviously be paying up front for it, but as we expect, we will have a disposal value, hopefully around 40% of the vessel, and also we will have the revenue over that lifetime that we expect will have topped back up the enforcement revenue reserve to a number that we'll be comfortable with, that when it comes time to replace the vessel in 20 years' time, we should have ample enough funds within that revenue reserve again, plus the disposal value, that we would not have need to essentially double charge ourselves to also build up a replacement reserve through the depreciation funding that we normally do. So that's why we sort of put that in there. We didn't feel that was a necessary requirement to add that additional layer of charging to plan for replacement when we have these other funding streams that we expect will take care of that for us when it comes time to replace the vessel.
Yeah. And presumably we have that discretion within our own depreciation policy.
Yes, we do. Yes, so HPRC doesn't have an official depreciation policy. In terms of the IRD, given that we're not governed by the normal tax rules, we also believe that we're fine with that space. The IRD does allow you to not depreciate assets as long as you inform them as well, so there's no issue there.
Okay. So just a follow-up question in relation to the income and the concept that this is going to break even. Is there a monitoring, and James, you talked about, surplus revenue potentially going back into the enforcement revenue fund. Will there be an ongoing monitoring to it so that if we are operating in deficit, we will know that will be serviced and it won't simply become a cost to the general rate?
Absolutely. So Adrian will get my monthly report that will incorporate the vessel as part of his overall expenditure monitoring. Will basically segregate out the ongoing running costs for this, and so it's his responsibility, and then me as also as the accountant that supports him, to be following up with him every month to making sure that we are sticking to the funding policy at that. We have various stops, checks and alerts that if we are showing as being in deficit within what we call our work stream, that will cause us to obviously dive in deep and find out why what's happening. But on a monthly basis, yes, that is checked, and also that goes up to ELT as part of our monthly reporting.
Fantastic, thank you. There are no more questions. It looks like there are none. We can move on to the recommendation now. There's a couple we might just have to tweak it, I think. Leanne has very helpfully and shrewdly pointed out that there's potentially a couple of decisions that we need to record here. One is an asset purchase, and so the question, and maybe that ultimately the Chief Executive might want to advise us whether we should, for good order, we should note the purchase outside of our LTP, so that decision. And I think this is just sort of dotting I's and crossing T's. In terms of the use of the Enforcement Revenue Fund, it might be helpful to nominate an amount, 626,000, so that it's clear, because the question is that we are exercising a discretion within that policy. So we're exercising that policy which has, tied to dollar amounts based on discretion. So I would have thought that that was appropriate. And in terms of the policy, I would just note that the policy actually requires, and I'll go to it at 7.3.4, if you want to look up the policy, which is in your Stellar packs, it actually requires that when we're spending this fund, that we have milestones and timeframes for the spend, and we don't. I certainly couldn't find those in the paper. So my suggestion is that just we pick that up. This is a recommendation to council. When the decision comes to council to make a decision, we just pick those two little aspects up, the milestone and the time frame. Otherwise, we don't meet the policy requirement.
Yeah, should I respond? Can I respond to that? Yeah, so 7.3.4 says the recipient of the funding should prepare and lodge with the GM of policy and regulation a project plan. So it's contingent on whether or not it's approved by council. Once approved, we have to go through the procurement process with the procurement team and also have a plan in place for meeting all of that in terms of the deadlines, the utilization, and also in a year's time, we can review the effectiveness of the assets, all right, and compare trends. So all of that will be done in due course as a part of the process.
That may be so, but I think certainly my reading of the policy is that it's on us as the decision makers to have that information before us.
Chair, wouldn't that happen
Sorry,
anyway?
I think that, and I think that's what the Harbour Master is saying, is that through our procurement policies in this council, yes, all of that is required. What Adrian's saying is once we get approval for funding, that will be prepared and lodged with myself. So 7.3.4 is to prepare and lodge with the HBRC General Manager Policy and Regulation, a project plan, a final report on the project, and the plan report to be scaled, everything that's in that policy.
Right, okay.
And so that will absolutely need to be done as part of our procurement policy plan.
Right.
So yes,
Wonderful.
the answer is
Thank you.
yes, we will.
But we don't need to cover it off in this.
I do not believe so.
Excellent, thank you. That's nice and simple. So the question is simply, do we need to record the decision, or we need to?
I suggest that you split the recommendation out. Chair and Leanne's got one. I think you do one to approve the purchase.
Yep.
And then one that you are approving the use of the enforcement fund as a contribution to that and purchase.
And just to be clear, that is to the value of 300,000 out of the fund.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You could take it as the value stated in the paper.
Right, so we'll just get that up on screen so we know what we're agreeing to. So Leanne, if you can just pop that 300,000. Do we need to add GST to that as well?
No,
Don't need to worry about that.
no, we'll
Excellent.
take care of it.
It's 326. We're government, we don't pay GST.
I think we probably do.
Mr Chair, while we're waiting, are we going to have an option to swap out the jet ski for the kayak, or that's off the table?
Not on the
Through you,
table.
Chair, that was an incredibly dangerous situation for the kayaker to be in, and I wouldn't put my staff in that situation.
Thinking this remote.
For
So,
the jet ski.
can we just make this big? Bird?
Surfboard?
See whether the.
Yeah.
Does that?
Paddleboard?
Paddleboard. Stand up. Do I just take out these words? So that we just leave it more open, or do you want it?
I think it's fine through
It's fine.
the
So let's read that one. Approves the acquisition of on-water assets, a vessel and personal watercraft in order to increase Hawke's Bay Regional Council's on-water response to and prevention of pollution and enforcement activities. 2.3, approves the acquisition being funded by enforcement revenue to the value of 300,000.
Sorry to interrupt, my apologies. Please accept my apologies.
No, yeah.
I think there's actually a bit there, if we're going to be pedantic, it should actually be for maritime navigation safety and the prevention of pollution enforcement activities. I think we mustn't lose sight of the fact that this is also and primarily for navigation safety matters.
Yep. Right, so dictate, please, for Leanne.
Leanne, I think it is to increase Hawke's Bay Regional Council's maritime safety capability. And on water response to and prevention of, so that's fine.
Okay. And so on 2.3, the words "and fees and charges," do we need those?
No, we don't. It's just the enforcement. Yeah, that's correct.
50%.
I think in the paper through you, Chair, there's a number of 326.
Correct.
I'd also maybe wonder that.
Oh no, sorry. I think that's borrowing of 326, is it not, James? It was 300 out of the reserve revenue.
Other way around. It's 326 out of reserve and 300 borrowed.
Okay.
Oh, right. So my apologies.
326 then. Excellent. Right. So I think that's settled. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please?
Yeah.
Is Laura able to move?
Yep.
Marvellous. Thank you, Laura. And a seconder.
Like, yes, otherwise I wouldn't be sitting here.
If we don't get a seconder, we're not going anywhere. Councillor Roadley, would either of you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for allowing our people to be able to understand water safety. Thank you for increasing the education programs, particularly Mahi Pōrangahau, because we lose a lot of our people in the water, a lot of them. And I can think of my cousins who have lost in the past few years, and this will help. 1, compliance. 2, water safety, so that we're able to gather our food. 3, I think this is the best spend that you've ever had on the table since I've been here. And increasing in water safety is of utmost our people, particularly around river monitoring and how dewatering can occur through pollution and impacts on our aquatic life. So thank you. I do believe you need to increase your impact more, so we don't see the Rocket Lab boat going up and down. Just truly appreciate you bringing this to the table. It was a good paper to read. So well done, team. Well done.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. That's right.
Great comments. Thank you, Laura. And I think it's been well traversed, so happy to.
Yeah.
If there are no other speakers, then I'll go to the vote. All those in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, team. Excellent presentation. Cool. Right, so we can go to the financial report, item 5. And who's going to lead us through that?
They'll get the media going.
Welcome.
Kia ora. Morning, councillors. Again, we'll be presenting the quarterly financial report up until the 31st of March. And what I've got up here with me is Pam Bicknell, our senior group accountant, and Megan McKenzie, our senior business partner, who will help take you through all of the stuff around our financials and a few additional items that we've got in the report this month. So I'll hand over to Pam to start off with.
Good morning. Through you, Chair, just wanted to take the financial report as read, certainly around my piece around Statement of Comprehensive Revenue and Expenditure in the balance sheet, or Statement of Financial Position as it's called these days. Our total operating revenue is above budget by 6%, so that's a total of 6.7 million. There's a number of drivers of that. Around the subsidies and grants, we're over budget by $1.5 million, and it's got pluses and minuses within that. So we've got unbudgeted revenue from the Silk Task Force piece of $32.7 million. We've received NIWI Category 2 works income, which is, much lower than we were anticipating. There's a shortfall there of $31.2 million. That's a timing thing, so it's happening later than we anticipated. And our other flood works is also below budget, to the tune of 1.9 million. Again, it's timing of getting those projects up and running. In our other revenue, that's over budget by 6.7 million, which comprises of a number of ups and downs. We've realised gains on our investment portfolios when we transitioned that from Jarden and Mercer over to our new provider. So we solidified some of the gains in that. That tallied $2.8 million. Our dividends are up about 2 point something, sorry, I lost the other part of the number. Our interest is down by about 2 point something. So across those three categories, we are up in total the 2.8. We've received insurance proceeds of $1.9 million, and we've had some NIWI fast tracking funds of $1.2 million. On the flip side, in the expenditure, we're over budget there by 33.5 million. There is 36.7 million of Silk Task Force and HBRRA funds spent there. And our finance costs are also over budget by $1.2 million. Our borrowing is up, and interest rates keep moving around on us as well. So that is driven by the two factors, increased debt and interest rates. Moving on to our statement of financial position, our infrastructure assets are continuing to go up. That's due to the spend. You know, we are rebuilding assets and also starting those new projects. Intangible assets value has decreased, predominantly due to the drop in the carbon credits pricing. So last quarterly report we brought to you, it was priced at $61.36 per unit. By the end of March, it was down to 57.5. Yeah, $57.50 per unit. And Monday, that price has dropped again to $55.48. So that's moving around quite a bit. Napier Port shares were valued at $2.55 per share. Monday's price, it was sitting at $2.78. Closed yesterday at $2.84. So if we had factored in the value at Monday's price, we would have pushed our balance sheet up by another 25 million. Movement in that price has quite a strong impact because we own a lot of shares. I believe it was this morning the Napier Ports declared a one-off special dividend of 2.5 cents per share. So we will be receiving 2.75 million of additional dividends through HBRIC feeding through. And on that, at that point,
Buy 2 boats.
I will pass over to Megan.
No, we're not.
I would buy 2 boats.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. Could buy a trawler with that.
Once they can set 11.
Good morning. Just a bit of an update on the forecast. So we're forecasting a full year underspend of $63.6 million across both capital and OPEX. The main contributors to this are IRG and NIWI. So NIWI was just a timing thing. When we set our LTP budget, we didn't have a lot of assumptions around the program. So there is a big carry forward coming for NIWI. This underspend is partly offset by overspending in debt. The interest costs on debt, river and lagoon openings, and cyclone-related recovery work like legal reviews and claim support. We are forecasting to be under on funding by 59.3, and again that relates to NIWI and IRG. If we draw down this year's general rate smoothing loan of $3.4 million, we'll have a general fund surplus of $3.3 million. So that's kind of where we're forecasting to be. In terms of carry forwards, the total requested indicative carry forward, so this will keep moving as we approach year end and more numbers come in, is 59.8 million. Of that, 51 million relates to NIWI. 8 million is for asset management, which includes regional water security, IRG, open spaces and coastal hazards. $1 million for corporate, which is mostly related to ICT renewals and the fact that we've extended our life on our assets, so we're not replacing them as fast. And there's $79K for ICM and the marine protection enhancement, and that's because the contract's been committed.
Okay. We've also included a bit more information this month around rates, debt collection, treasury, and some of our cyclone and iwi costs in there. On the rates side, our penalties and collection rates are in similar percentages to previous years. Obviously, the penalties are slightly higher in dollar values, but that was because of the previous rates rises. So we're seeing it in line with previous years in terms of the amounts or the percentages of those happening. Noting that our remissions have not been as high as the 1.2 million that we put into the budget and we are almost through all of them. There's only a handful that are left to be finalised, and we're just working with our ratepayers that have made those remissions to actually work through to make sure that they can be assessed properly. In terms of debt collection, age debt continues to decrease, especially over the 90-day period through the actions of the debtors team. They've been doing a fantastic job in clearing off that old outstanding debt, and they've also now moved on to looking at a lot of our old outstanding rates debt, and so far in the last quarter have saved us about 30 grand in fees that we would have previously sent out to debt management agency and doing the collection themselves rather than sending them out. So that's been a really positive impact in there. On the Treasury side, we had $113.8 million in external debt at the end of the quarter. Over the quarter, we'd taken out an extra $10 million in a standby facility with LGFA to ensure that our liquidity remains really good, going through there at a lower cost than how we had previously been doing and borrowing money to have cash sitting in the bank. So this is a much cheaper option to maintain the liquidity there. And just noting that financial markets have obviously been very turbulent. That shows up in the figures at the end of March. Obviously, if you've been looking at your KiwiSavers, it's been going up and down a bit, and depending on what happens in a certain country overseas. And the other thing that we've got here is Fitch are currently doing their first annual review of our credit rating at the moment, so we're providing them with a reasonable amount of information in there. On the NIWI project, we've done an update in there, just showing you against the updated budgets and the spend on each of the projects that are sitting in there. All of the project delivery plans have been approved, and we've spent about $19 million to date as at the 31st of March. The key financial impact for the council of this is that we are carrying that spend ourselves at the moment as we work through the reimbursement process with the Crown, and that's had just over a $400,000 impact to date on our interest costs that we hadn't built into budgets and we will need to sort out going forward. And then I'll ask Megan just to give a bit of an update on the cyclone recovery and insurance.
Sure. So in terms of the cyclone recovery and insurance and NEMA claims, to date we've spent $66.8 million and we've received $32.4 from external sources. A further $13.8 million is forecasted from NEMA and insurance, and we're hoping to have that in the coming months. This would leave a hole of about $20.7 million. Of that 20.7, 13.6 has been covered by rates and reserves, which should leave us with about a $7 million internal loan. And just a note that there is $14.1 million of infrastructure work to come, and $1.3 million for the coroner's inquiry that isn't included in these calculations, as that work is still under assessment.
So it's sort of a summary of the paper there in front of you, and we'll open up, Chair, for any questions.
Thank you. Look, and Chris, just probably as a kind of high-level comments for those brave enough to try and follow this online, is it fair to say that there's a lot of swings and roundabouts in terms of particularly timing differences around silt and debris? Well, not so much timing, but the fact of a big program coming in and coming out, but it's fully offset. Same doesn't apply to quite the same extent with the NIWI, but definitely timing differences and we funding our portion plus pre-funding the Crown's contribution, so that's a big effect. But from an operational point of view, so there are big movements, but the net operational effect is that we're staying slightly under budget.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's down to the whole team. So, yeah, that's a great effort. So there's a lot of moving parts, but overall, we're staying on track and slightly beating forecast. Yeah.
Can I just conclude? Our forecasts are showing right now, so the silt and debris money must be used by the 30th of June. And very strict purchase order forecasting, I think we're going to end up after $263 million with a reimbursement back to the Crown of $200,000 underspend. So no overspend for this organisation, no extra payments made. So that is the forecast at the moment.
Fantastic. Thank you. Councillor Curtin.
Thank you, Mr Chair. On that note, can I take you to the paper at paragraph 26, and that gives us our revenues and expenditure by group. Do you see that? You're in that space?
Yep.
If you go to policy and regulation, I'm just curious to know whether the manager of that area can explain a $31 million overrun on her budget, if you mind helping us out there. I'm just being tongue-in-cheek, Madam Chair, Mr Chair. It goes to your question, your comment, Mr Chairman, around the phasing and run of these things. But what we've got there is a bit of an anomaly, and I think we need to clarify this. Even though we've got this fluctuation, we're needing some clarity around where the money actually falls and our reporting thereof. Because when I go to the other paper, the Organisational Performance Report, there's a different story around policy and regulation there. So we just need to make sure we coincide those two reports.
Yep. I think so in terms of the additional unbudgeted costs in there is around the sediment and debris, the Silt Task Force funding that sits within policy and regulation as a group of activities, remembering that this report is based around the group of activities. Sure. Our organisational performance report more so associates around our management structure and how they are working there.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah. Nevertheless, if we can make sure we clarify and coincide the respective reports so one reflects the other, because they don't at the moment. And in our forecasts as well, because that's showing me that policy and regulation is running 32 million behind budget, when in fact it's not. And just the other comment for my benefit, if we could use the same format in both reports.
So, can I, through you, Chair, what we do with the organisational performance report, it is based on our operating budget, so the main report, financial report, is based on our annual plan or LTP budget at the start of the year. We then maintain an operating budget during the year where known changes have happened. For example, sediment and debris costs are going to come in that we did not know at the time that we set our annual plan or our LTP. Therefore, in the organisational performance report, there is a budget for sediment and debris, but in the financial report, there isn't a budget for sediment and debris. The reason that we use the LTP budget in the finance report is that is the budget we must report on at the end of the financial year in our financial statements. Sure. Okay. The reason we use the operating budget in the organisational performance report is it gives a much clearer performance of those areas of activity based on our latest position of what we know.
I appreciate that. But, and I wonder whether the sediment and debris expenditures are best recorded in under cyclone recovery. Are they cyclone recovery? My question. They're not NIWI. Are they cyclone recovery?
In terms of the financial report, they sit under, we don't have a group of activities for cyclone recovery, and so we had to sit them under existing groups of activities, which those aligned mostly to policy and regulation. And if you remember, as we went through the cyclone, a lot of the response and recovery costs were sitting under civil defence.
Possibly,
What it is.
possibly, councillor Curtin, we could have put them under something else.
Sure.
However, they will net to zero. They will be gone in 3 months. So
Just hold my breath.
hold, please. Yeah.
Yeah, Councillor Ormsby.
Thank you, Chair, and my question has been answered. Thank you, Councillor Curtin, for that line of commentary. But I would like to thank the team, the finance team, so brilliantly led by Susie, around the doggedness that you've had to, I guess, endure with trying to recovery money in terms of insurance and NEMA. So really thank you, and what a success silt and debris acquisition to deal with such a major issue has nearly come to an end. So I just want to thank the team. Kia ora.
Councillor McIntosh.
The average penalty, $57.84. Can you tell me, is that, in calculating that, is that all the people who had a penalty, the average of their payment is $57?
Yes. So everyone that had a penalty issued, on average, the total of the value of the penalty was $57.
Okay. And is there some mechanism whereby, often that'll be oversights and that sort of thing, is there some mechanism where we encourage people to go on direct debits or something like that to alleviate that?
Yeah, so anyone that is ringing in about a penalty, we can talk to them, the rates team will talk to them, they will assess, if it was an oversight or something like that, they may remit that penalty into there, they will talk about them about going on to a direct debit to avoid future penalties and that, so they do have a good conversation with them.
Any further questions? Yep. Councillor Sears.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you for the report. I find them very easy to read, which is a testament to you, because I don't find the language easy usually. I understand our issue with the timing on the NIWI funding, and that we're carrying, I think you said $31.5 million worth of prepayment, carrying the debt, the interest payments on that. I couldn't, do I see that as a specific figure because that is a high risk area for us, or is that wrapped in? I tried to see it as its own figure, but is it just wrapped within our interest payments? And is it something we should see separately so we can keep an eye on that?
It is wrapped within our interest payments, so part of the reason for having additional debt at the moment and therefore higher interest payments is the NIWI stuff in there. At an organisational level, we separate a lot of those costs out to the individual groups and stuff like that, so we are managing at an organisational level all of the NIWI stuff together so that we can at the end of that project go, well, this is exactly what happened there, this is the stuff that was in line with the original plan and everything like that.
Can I follow up, Chair, with that? So it'll be split across the particular projects, or may even fall into different areas, and the interest will fall then into those, each department. And currently, what is it sitting at roundabout? Are we carrying extra with that?
So we're saying at the moment, I think it's about 434,000 additional.
Just for the NIWI piece?
Just in the NIWI piece.
Okay, $500,000. Thank you.
Can I just add for clarity, sorry, that it's not just NIWI. Remember, we're carrying short-term borrowing for the cyclone that the insurance proceeds are reimbursing as well. So actually the cyclone cost is actually just as bad as just the NIWI. So for the cyclone, however, we've got nowhere to put that back to apportion that to. So that's sitting in a sort of a cyclone category. And at the end of all of this, there will need to be a sort of a wash-up total cost of extra cyclone. So it's not just NIWI that's generating that interest. Yeah.
Can I? But the NIWI figure, this ongoing problem, will continue year on year on year on year until the NIWI project's finished, because the timing of the government payments aren't looking to become any more aligned with our spending, are they?
Yes, they are. We've incurred a lot of costs to establish the program to date, and we could never claim under the NIWI program. You can't start claiming from NIF until you've signed off your design, your PDP, and you've submitted project schedules. They're all now done. So we're now in a position to move quicker, but we will still continue to have to carry a sort of a working capital amount, probably 2 months' worth of digging, 10, 20 million on the way forward, just to pay for things before we get reimbursed.
Thank you.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And my question really leverages off that. In presenting the report, we were told, I think you said 20 million shortfall for cyclone recovery costs, and 13.6 was covered by, I didn't quite catch it, leaving a deficit of 6 point.
So we're expecting to get in another 13.7 from NEMA and insurers.
Oh, right. And at the moment, that's being funded by this mysterious creature called internal loans or something, is it?
Yeah. We've effectively taken external debt so that we've got the cash.
External debt.
Yeah, we've paid for all of that, and then as the insurance comes in, we'll be able to repay that external debt.
Yes, I didn't see that 20.7 figure anywhere in the information. It doesn't matter. I quite often hear in the verbal reports different figures than that we've spent some time going through in the written reports, and my brain collapses in the middle of the oral report for that reason. So
Effectively, the 20 million is the 6 million final internal loan that we're expecting to have to repay, less adding to that the 13.7 million of insurance money that we still have to actually receive.
Yes.
In there. So
okay, all right, and that's I think there's a funding breakdown for that at paragraph 76. How we might have to fund that, right?
That's correct.
Okay, and then just a more, I guess, practical question of a sort. We have 2.99 million of outstanding trade debtors. Could you, when you talked about the recovery of aged debt, can you just give me a couple of examples of what, for a regional council, might comprise a trade debtor? Who are these people?
So
What do they
various
provide to us?
trade debtors, we have things like our leasehold rentals, so rentals coming in there. Freshwater science charges have just gone out in April, so they would be in their trade debtors. We classify trade debtors as those debtors that aren't the rates debt.
I see.
Really in there. So all of our consents and compliance, and that's it in there as well. Gravel charges that are going out there, any of the funding that we're getting from government agencies that we've sent invoices for, those types of things.
Very much. That's been very helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Van Beek.
Yeah. First of all, none of us around this table, and especially you as the finance team, we've never signed up to Cyclone Gabrielle. And we continue to de-water the landscape from Cyclone Gabrielle in the way we have to encounter the effects of it. And once again, you've done a fantastic job as a team. You've more than tripled the workload that you normally would have. Imagine if you didn't have a cyclone, how easy would it be to report today, and you haven't. So well done, and to all of the team and those who have worked very hard and continue to work very hard in this space, and not just financial, it's also our other staff as well. Now, I liked how you opened the discussion here, Mr. Chair, is that those online, because it's those external who we get all the questions to ask, they don't, but they hopefully through the discussions that we have here that they get a bit of an idea of what's going on. So you talked about we're under budget currently. Is that purely if you look at as a council, or is there also a certain amount of delay? Because through what we understand in the discussions that we have with you, to get money out of the door is actually quite difficult at times. We set times for our budgets, but then we find out that underspend is due to delays because we can't get money out of the door. So being under budget, is that due to delays, or is that purely off what we actually have set in our budgets?
It really is a huge number of factors that can include all of those things. Some things can be delays, especially in some of the integrated catchment management areas where they plan a lot of work to happen in the last quarter of the year. Takes a long time to do all of the contract work and get those filled, and there will be a lot of money going into that last quarter, so it's a bit of a timing difference to where an evenly phased budget might not be there. Some of the other reasons for underspends is we have had some better returns coming in. So, for example, changing fund managers actually realised a lot of sort of gains in share values that had happened in the past. So that causes a bigger impact of investment income on the general rate picture there. Generally, overall, we will, as you can see from the forecast is slightly, we're not as underspent on the general funds as we are currently. So that's the timing stuff that's happening, especially in that ICM area. But there are genuine underspends where work has just not done to the level of what we had expected through there, especially NIWE and stuff like that. But that will go out to the next year, and we will bring that back in the carry forwards paper to say, well, we weren't able to spend that as we expected in this year, and we'll carry forward that planned budget into the next year.
Laura.
Just some clarification on 64.2. 8.5 million was spent on welfare, of which 5.8 million was recovered through NEMA. Why were those other three, the internal staff time, Seedom food and assets and generate, why were they ineligible for that NEMA?
That is part of the NEMA policies there, that they consider that internal staff time, that councils already have the staff sitting around, so they won't reimburse for time staff just get diverted to something else going into there. So the staff time, the things like food to supply them, things like that, assets that you're creating, the council keeps them at the end so they can fund them.
So where did the 2.6 million come from? How did you cover that?
So the 2.6 million then has to come from other funding sources. Some things that we were able to charge to other organisations where we had flown some police into an area or stuff like that, we will raise invoices for, but the vast majority of that comes from our ratepayer. There will be obviously some underspends there were underspends in other areas when staff were diverted to do response time. We didn't do some work in other areas, so in that year other areas underspent a little bit. But that was why we put a cyclone recovery rate a couple of years ago to actually bring in some additional general rate funding to cover these costs. And at the end, the 6 million that we've talked about, that will be a final internal loan. We have about 1.3 million, 1.4 million a year in our LTP to help repay that loan over the next few years.
Thank you.
Councillor Oldley.
Thank you, Chair. At the risk of traversing what's already been dealt with, congratulations on the first payment from the Crown for the NEWE project, so that's awesome to get that underway. My question is around, I think I've actually got a bit confused about what numbers, but around 19 million we've paid out across our different projects, assuming in cold hard cash, to get work underway to where it is, and that first reimbursement of just under 500k. It seems like a really small amount for a very big spend. Are we expecting to get some very big amounts between now and 30th of June for the end of the financial year? Are you expecting the cash to start rolling in, or is it going to have a long catch-up tail?
I'll go back, great question. I'll just go back to something I mentioned before, that we can't claim through the government until all the PDPs and the project schedules are done. So
those are done though, aren't they?
Waiheke, yeah, so Waiheke is one of our sort of primary projects that are progressing first. So that's more certainty around that in order to progress the first claim. And so what we are wanting to do and trying to do is ensure that we maximise these claims, and they take a bit of work to ensure that when we meet milestones, where we do have set up costs for the organisation, that they are apportioned correctly through all of the claims. It just takes a bit of coordination where they're outside of normal, one digger, one contractor per job, to enable us to distribute costs correctly, if that makes sense. So it does take a bit of time. We'll get much better now. We just needed that first one to see how that would work, what they were looking for, and it's worked pretty well. We've got another load of project schedules in with NIF at the moment, so they will look to turn those quite quickly.
So you are expecting a big truckload in for the end of this financial year?
When you say truckload, we are trying to progress at pace, yes. So 75% of that 19 million is hopefully, in train in the next few months.
Congratulations, team. It is awesome work.
Right, I think we're there in terms of questions. Fantastic work on both sides.
Yeah.
The staff and councillors for your perspicacious, I'll use that word dangerously, some very good questioning. So with that, it just leaves us to receive and note the financial report. Councillor Williams, are you moving that?
Happy to move, yeah.
Thank you. And a seconder. That was
I'm
that was a
happy
bid.
to
That was a
second
bid,
that.
was it? Councillor
Yeah, I was.
Roadley, seconder. Would you like to speak to?
Just to very briefly re-echo Councillor Van Bake's comments. This is probably the most thorough and helpful overview of the whole picture that I can recall receiving. It is an enormously complicated picture. Sorry for picking you up on the one number that you'd used that wasn't in there, the 20, and having to backfill that. But it's magnificent work and really helps us in our governance oversight from an accountability perspective to our community. So thank you.
All right.
Yeah, just endorse those comments and those of the councillors around it. A great report, easy to read, a very complicated picture. A lot of, dare I say it, not crystal ball gazing, very educated looking into expectations of where money might be, where it might be coming. So you're well done and safe, so thank you.
Thank you. So all those in favour of receiving and noting the report, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Look, I'm conscious we've been sitting here since 9 o'clock. I'm conscious we've got our guests, Dan Drezianek and Tom, Tom Skirman here. So we should probably not make them wait for another half an hour of organisational reporting, and we'll skip forward to that item, to the HBRIC item, but just have a 5 minutes. A company stop for anyone who wants it. Good stuff. I'm back in 5 minutes. HBRIC directors.
Good to have you here.
And bearing good news.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair, and kia ora koutou, everyone. Welcome to the quarterly update from HBRIC. So today, I thought we'd begin by talking a bit about the port. There's a half-yearly update which came out this morning, was released at 9 o'clock this morning to the market, which I can brief you on. Tom would then like to give us an update on the Food East. He was at a board meeting there yesterday. And then we'll get some comments from our, along through that, from our council directors. And we'll sort of take the paper as read for questions. The good news is that this morning the port released its half-yearly results, and the results was a strong 6 months, and really driven by Pan Pac being sort of back into full swing, sort of as of around Christmas. They've had a lot of extra container volumes have been up because they've had a lot of extra volume around transshipments and DLRs, which is really where ships call in and shuffle containers around on the ship and take them off and put them on other ships, and so it's become quite a good extra earner. The bulk volumes are still down a bit year on year, which is the logs. Last year's equivalent 6 months, the port was still benefiting from the wind throw volumes from over in Taupo, where all those forests got smashed by the cyclone and got broken, and they had to be processed early. So we're sort of back to normal on the logs, or a bit down. There's a little bit of suppressed demand out of China. So strong, and also we wrapped up, the port wrapped up its dealings with the insurance company while we're talking about insurance, so that was good to get that wrapped up in the 6 months. So the port's in a balance sheet and cash is in a good position. And so this time last year, so the port usually announces two dividends a year. One of them is in December and one's in June. The December one's usually sort of 60% of the dividend for the year, and roughly, and the June is sort of the smaller dividend. This time last year, they declared a dividend. The port declared a dividend of 3 cents a share, which is equivalent of $6 million net dividend, of which we get 55. We got 55% of that as a 55% shareholder. This year, the dividend, interim dividend, is an extra cent a share, so 4 cents a share, or 8 million. So it's up. And then also the directors have declared a special dividend of a further 2.5 cents a share. It's a one-off dividend, really, to just acknowledge the strong position the port is in, but also a bit of a reward for shareholders who have suffered through the cyclone and the lower dividend that we had post-cyclone, and so it's a bit of a reward for that. So the numbers for HBRIC, we had budgeted 3.3 million of net dividend in June. We'll be getting 7.1. Yeah, 7.1. So it's an extra 3.85 million. I think, was it Neil? Did you want to make a comment on that?
Well, yeah, thanks, thanks, Ian. I think that's exceptional news coming through to us. It sort of reflects volatility with the paper as you see it. Demonstrates the position at the 31st of March, but then a short time later we've got significantly improved performance just both on paper and in cash, just in a short space of time. So we're very grateful for that. As you've already highlighted, a Napier Port half-year result, 7.1 million coming through from for the next payment from the port.
4 cents a share, fully imputed, 2.5 cents special dividend. So that and it puts us in a position where HBRIC will pay to the council, meet its obligations close to the 18 million, but we have a further 3.8 million, if you like, available for application to the Revenue Resilience Fund, or alternatively consideration by council as to what it may wish to do with that. So we're in a fortunate position to be there. I think the other important, or two other important points to come out of the report are around the HBRC loan, and you'll be pleased to know that we will be returning to council the loan funding of 16.6 million, is it, will be returned to council. So that has a significant impact on our balance sheet as a result of that from the HBRC side. But the other part of the report, well, I think it's worth mentioning, is the investment strategy review. So another important element of the report that needs to be discussed. Well, you may have some comments on that.
I'll just finish sorry, thanks, Neil. I'll just finish the last final point on the port update is that we've also, the directors have also released an amended earnings guidance for the full year to the end of September. And so the previous guidance was $54 to $58 million EBITDA, and it's been upgraded to 59 to 63 million EBITDA. So just the third bit of good news. So Will, did you have some comments on that? Yeah, thanks, Neil and Dan. Well, I just want to say it's been great to be part of this team sitting up the front here, and with Neil, and just, I guess, addressing the structure at first of the board and bringing in some more independent directors who have been a real good injection around the board. Tom doing all the review of our assets, and actually just getting a much better understanding of what we've got, so then making much better decisions. While we've been doing that, there's been some pretty bad news around us, around the port and dealing with the cyclone aftermath, international markets and our managed funds, and Chris has already referred to our KiwiSaver balances this morning, and so we all know what's been going on there. But with all of that going on, just this report and the Napier Port result, I think we've just seen the value of, that diversification. And even though we've got to put up with some volatility, and that's probably not going to change, it's just really good to see, I guess, just being rewarded from all of that work going on. And I think, we've still got to implement a lot of that work, and hopefully just see much better results as a result of that going forward. So just, well done to the team so far, and just good to get this news this morning. Thanks, Phil. Tom, do you want to talk about the latest?
Well, I'll just following on from Neil's commentary there. I mean, just what is the impact of this? Because I suppose if we come back to the start, cash dividend expectations were reset as part of the strategic review down to $12 million, but then at the last annual plan, an additional $3 million was requested, this little summary table, is that to date, to 31 March, the group has received just a little bit over $11 million of revenue, of cash revenue from its group investments. With this news, we're projected to receive another 6.34, so that's probably netting out some HBRIC expenses. And so that means that with your so we're obviously very confident that we're going to meet your higher cash dividend requirements, and there should be some surplus over to to apply to, which was your second requirement, was to to build an income resilient reserve fund, and so. But there's just a little caveat there in terms of the fact that the volatility around the managed funds has dropped them around a little bit. So we have to wait till we see where we get to the end of the year to figure out exactly where they're sitting and things like that. But it's so in some respects, I think council asked for some advice for us about the higher dividend payment. We said that it was achievable, but it would probably come at the expense of your income resilience fund, and I think this report result sort of gets us back to neutral. So it's a good result, and I just point that out. The other thing I just wanted to quickly comment on, unrelated to that, is Food East. Great timing, Michael. Food East issued their quarterly report, and I attended their board meeting yesterday. And I think the paper, points to the fact that it's very challenging conditions, economic conditions, to establish tenancies in there, and they are kind of niche tenancies. The zoning there is looking for food innovation and things like that. So. I'm very impressed the Food East board, and Michael, are proactively pursuing, multiple commercial opportunities. They're not just sitting there saying, the tenancy market is soft and, and that's the world. They've been very proactive, and, it's a hard needle to thread to be both commercial and innovative, and, and they're doing a great job of that. And so the reason of raising this is, I think, is to probably just sort of highlight or remind council that, even though for us it is a commercial, for HBRIC it is a commercial investment, and we're constantly reminding, the board, and as are the other limited partners, Hastings District Council and Progressive, they're very mindful of the bottom line. The work that they're doing, does play into regional economic development, and some of the innovations they're looking at around food, and and dare I say, higher outcomes from land use and things like that. So we all know the pressures and things like that. So I believe Hastings District Council, Michael can nod, recently held a workshop there and took the opportunity to visit the facility. And so through you, Chair, I'd thoroughly recommend that this organisation, it would be great to coincide with a Food East board meeting when the directors are there, so you can hear their story from themselves, because I think it's a good story, and through us you're associated with it. So that's the only thing I wanted to add there. And so happy for general questions.
Thank you. Open the floor to questions. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, well, thank you, Tom. You've anticipated my question, really, which was the thought in my head that unexpected, or better than expected, dividend return of a special dividend puts us in a place where we can, in effect, pay back what we took out beyond the projections to get us through the last year's long-term plan. So, just to clarify, there is something in our letter of expectations that we build up this resilience fund rather than just sort of take the cream off the top when it arrives. It's supposed to sort of, as a first priority, build up that reserve instead of doing that.
Yeah, so notionally we're targeting, to increase that fund by $2 million a year, and the initial target is to be at least the equivalent of 1 year full port dividend.
So this will help get us back into that track.
Get you on the road. Yeah.
Thank you.
Potentially.
Councillor Ormsby, then Councillor McIntosh.
Thanks, team. In terms of Food East, has there been a change of board of late, or are there plans to be a change of board?
Yes, at the last limited, Dan, you can jump in here, but at the last limited partners meeting, just conscious of costs and things like that, they did ask for, the limited partners collectively asked for a review, and as a result of that review process, a director has actually voluntarily stepped down, and so that just helps reduce the cost. That's the quick summary.
Yeah, so they're dropping. It's actually one of the, by rights we get to appoint 4 directors.
3.
I think it's I think it's 4, but we've only ever done 3. And the other 2 shareholders get 1 director each. We've just dropped, we only ever appointed 3 of our 4, and we've dropped from 3 to 2. But the board themselves sort of worked out what they needed to go forward, and yeah, so it was driven a bit by cost, but also the nature of the project's going into a new phase, and there's just different skills required probably than when we started out. So Christy Campbell is stepping down at the end of June. That made a really great contribution, but she's stepped down.
Thank you.
Councillor McIntosh.
Tom, do you know the, sorry if this is an unfair question, but effect of the tariffs on managed funds, do you pre-tariff and post-tariff, what's the difference been?
I mean, Tracy, the managed funds portfolio, like every portfolio, and I'm assuming KiwiSaver portfolios, has been, through a very volatile period. I think, and just picking up on comments that Chris Lever made when he was last here, we were slightly lucky is that because we were building the portfolio, because we were new, we were slightly more weighted to cash than we normally would have been. And I think they managed to exploit some opportunities to buy in that market. But currently we are, in terms of, as at 31 March, which I think are the safest numbers to go, we're still below where we'd like to be.
Because we're also considering our capital protected amount as well. So we always basically look at our portfolio opening balance, add that on and go, where should we actually be at? And we are slightly under that at the moment, but the markets are recovering. So we are hopeful that we will be sitting back and at a position at the end of financial year where we have covered our capital protection amount, will be slightly under it for this 1 year in this volatile market. So,
I don't know if Dan's prepared to pull out his crystal ball, but I have no view on what happens next.
It's a good example of we're investing more aggressively now, and this is the sort of stuff you've got to suck up when you're investing more aggressively.
Yeah, and I think the observation is politically there's been quite a lot of flip-flopping, and so the markets are just, they're recovering quite quickly on the news of every reversal that they hear from the president. So, I don't think everyone's a bit calm. I think people are generally a bit calmer than they were initially because, in the end, the bond markets and the share market are kind of boundaries for political decisions where they soon get a smack on the nose if they get too carried away. That's kind of how my personal view of it.
Councillor Williams?
Yeah, thank you. A follow-up actually to the answer just given. Can you remind me, please, how the capital protected amount is determined and its function in terms of our managed fund portfolio? How have we set that?
it's set at 2.5% of the opening balance at the beginning of the financial year.
Right, so that's again another form of reserve, is it? So that we can in fact take a 2.5% hit and still have a balance sheet where we want it.
Around further questions. Look, I have one. Well, I've got a couple actually. Just in relation to the investment strategy review. So that we, in the paper notes at para 17, that we had the initial findings to this committee back in 2024. We haven't talked about that report there, and for the sake of completeness, we have a full report now that's been presented along with this paper. Is there any change, or is that just codifying what's already been discussed?
Codifying what's already discussed, and probably I think the only real change is we are already having proactive discussions in terms of Wellington leasehold tenancies. Whether they come to anything, we're not sure, and we're working on diving deeper into the Napier portfolio and the ACC transaction.
Okay. And just slightly further up the page, at para 15, we note about the repayment of the loan from HBRIC, the $16.67 million that Neil mentioned earlier, and that and he highlighted the really important point that that relieves substantial balance sheet pressure on the regional council in a post-cyclone context where debt is and debt ceilings are a real issue. So thank you very much for that. Could you just explain whether that has any practical impact, or what the practical impact on HBRIC of that paper transaction is?
All it means is that we had an asset on our balance sheet of 16.6 million, which was a loan to council via dividend. That asset will disappear on our side, and the liability will disappear on your side.
And I think you were getting the princely sum of 2% per annum on that.
Yes, and so we were getting 2%.
Lucky.
Loan, which we were having to pay tax on as well, so it didn't really make a lot of sense. The council wasn't getting a deduction for tax, so tax-wise it wasn't great on.
Right, so in terms of your ability to meet our avaricious dividend expectations, no practical implications.
As long as they remain unchanged.
Thank you.
I think,
Susie.
can I just add, incredibly grateful from an HBRC side of the thinking that's gone into that and the progression of that. From a balance sheet point of view, you will all be acutely aware of our debt capacity, which has been, when we talk to Fitch, when we talk to credit rating agencies, when we incorporate, the sort of total amount that we can borrow, that 16.6 is generally sitting there hindering that capacity ability. So this is great for HBRC. For me, it's an outcome of this whole a group strategic way of looking at this. So the whole plan is working just in terms of that strategy. So thank you.
Fantastic. So if there are no further questions and nothing else for our panel to relate to us, then we can go to the recommendation, which is simply that we receive a note to the quarterly report. And I think Councillor Curtin's going to move that, and who's going to second that? Councillor McIntosh, would you like to speak to that?
Just very briefly, Mr Chairman, just a thanks to the Chair and Tom and all the directors on HBRIC. I think that's the configuration is going extremely well. I think that, as mentioned earlier, we have experienced extraordinary volatility, but at the end by 30 June, I think we're in a position to say we've weathered the storm. Is about as best we can say in terms of our financial position. But I think the real bright point for a year's work is the asset review and the clarity which we now have around what our investment portfolio looks like, and the ability to, the revelation that there is an enormous amount of additional work to be done to realise the potential of that portfolio. And I think that's the real hard part coming up. But what it's done is brought that to the surface. It's identified where that investment is needing to perform and should perform much better. But at least we know that. We now know what we didn't know. So from that perspective, I think that's the real positive news coming out of this report and the next one. So very happy to move the report, Mr Chair.
Thank you. Well said.
Actually, I think I'm saying the same thing, but in a slightly different way. I mean, we've done some good stuff. There's more to come, so we've got to keep our foot on the gas pedal.
Thank you. Right, so it seems there are no other speakers, so all those in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, team, as ever.
Oh, this is the first meeting you're not grumpy.
Abiel.
You're still waiting for the grumpy day's not over.
Just come. Yeah.
That's right. Just not lunchtime yet.
Still time.
Right, there's still time.
Sandwich, 3 minutes.
But we finished, right? Or you got another one? Oh no, this is the last. Oh, here we go.
Thanks, Dan.
Let's keep us grump free, team.
So, welcome back.
We don't have any grumpy for you. Must be
Welcome
you.
back, Chris.
You're sitting in the corner next time.
Yeah, you're in the naughty corner.
Look, we're we've got 6 minutes on the clock, but we have time. Lunch is turning up at 12, and then we've got half an hour, 11 minutes on the clock. Lunch is not turning up at 12:30.
Nothing but the truth, Mr. Chair.
We have sufficient time to do justice to the organisation performance report, and with that, I'll hand over to the staff.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Kia ora again. This report is largely, the methodology that we use to pull the all performance report is largely the same as you've seen before. It's the difference between what you've seen in the financial report and this. The financial report is largely sort of those macro big movements, and this one is designed to focus on operational activity, and it provides you with commentary to explain the situation-specific context that's driving that activity and the performance. There's currently 50 staff who have licences for Opal 3 who go in and do their reporting on cost centre, which is then rolled up to activity, also level of service measures and corporate metrics. So it draws on a lot of intelligence from around the organisation. And finance staff as well as group managers to review. So it's a big operation. And that's largely all I was going to say. And we've got the GMs on here to answer any questions for their areas.
Oh, okay. Apart from Chris Dolly, who's had to go at 11:30, I've just had whispered in my ear. Right, okay. Over to the floor. Councillor Sears.
I'll start. Thank you. Through you, Chair. It's exactly the same question as I asked last quarter around Alagoimas. So they've fallen now to 70%. It was 89%, I think, last time. I replied to in the 20 days. I understand the problems with the amount of Lagoimas. I understand the complexities that we're seeing with Lagoimas. What I said last quarter was Lagoimas are the place where our community go when they can't find their way to get information or connect with the organisation in general. Sure, there are some very specific things. They are becoming increasingly complex and unsatisfactory, really, to our community. What I asked last time, Chair, that you noted down was, I think we really need to see, as other councils show every month or every quarter, just the list of Ragoima requests. Doesn't have to have names, because what it does for us as councillors makes us understand what it is our community's not getting answers to and digging into every month, or however you want to do it. I'd really like to see that. I'd like to know what our community is asking for. And I asked also if we were taking the time that Lagoimas were taking. They're hugely complex, often, not always. And if we were reporting time against the Lagoimas, because that's something that's happening all around the country, that some Lagoimas are taking 40 hours to reply to. And the third question I asked was, if we are finding that Lagoimas are becoming a significant burden to the organisation and the information that our community wants is not freely available, could we have a discussion around how we are trying to meet that need in a different way? Because if we discover, I haven't got the answer yet, if we're taking the time on each Lagoimas, that it's starting to cost us $300,000 or $400,000 a year to pull that information together, then we need to look as an organisation how we're doing it more effectively. So it was a little bit to you on picking up what I asked last time, and then the questions to me were, why are we right down to 70%? Are we taking the time that Lagoimas are taking, and have you thought any more about new ways in which we can do a better job of this?
Yeah, well, I'll respond to that, but I'll let the staff respond first. Thank you.
Yep, Leanne, what's the best?
Kia ora, through you, Chair, because I'm sort of the Lagoima person for the council. There's a number of things there. Firstly, the way we report on the
measure of service, level of service, is actually that we have provided the information within the 20 working days, which is not what the same as meeting the legislative requirement, which is that we respond, letting them know what's happening within the 20 days. So there is a bit of a disconnect there. However, most of what we're seeing is not just, the usual requests from the community wanting to know information that's not really detailed, really specific to, say, a pollution event, a highly technical issue, resource consenting, enforcement action, those types of things. That's the type of requests we're receiving now, as opposed to the more generic or easily answered, less complex requests that we're used to getting. Also, there's an increased need for us to have the advice from our legal advisors included in that. So all of that does add to the amount of time it takes to answer. Second part of that is, no, we don't charge time against answering LGOIMA requests. That's all catered for within the overheads, unless it is going to be charged for, which would be always approved by the group manager, owing to the complexity of the response that's required. So I'm not sure if that helps.
No, sorry, the question was, were we recording the amount of time they were taking, not the charge? And I asked last time if we could look at that. I know some councils are doing that now, Chair, and just to follow what it's costing, not charging for it. And if we could, that was probably back to you again, Chair.
We can take that away.
Yeah. Take away and look at it. And yes, we can. Probably the easiest, because it will be a manual process, is if I was to provide a list of everything that's been received in that month to the councillors via email, if that's sufficient.
Certainly.
Yeah, so the request has been made. I have had that discussion with general managers. So, yeah, it's under consideration.
I think Desi's.
Can I just add to that? So we have in the past published the register with names removed. That is on our to-do list. We just have been short-staffed. But the governance team is fully, the roles are all filled, so, we can look to pick that up. And your third thing was, are we looking at ways to do this more efficiently? So we have Pip O'Connor, our CIO, did bring a proposal to Leanne and myself, a model that Tasman are using AI. So we are exploring those options. It's just been a matter of, we know that will save us time, but we don't have the time or the resources to look into it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
But we will.
Laura.
Oh, kia ora team. Just a question around staffing and fleets. Given that in the previous comment I made around staffing and overworked staff, and there is capacity to fill these roles, particularly in the rural area, is there any appetite to help increase rural presence of HBRC?
Not as a planned priority at the moment. So at the moment we are holding 20 vacancies to meet savings targets that council set for this financial year, and that will be 30 vacancies in effect from the 1st of July. Coming out of the efficiency and effectiveness review, we'll have a look at the way we provide services to the rural community. So if I could hold that question until then, and maybe come back to you once that's completed.
And the second question I was asking was around fleet replacement. I just recall Zan in a couple of corporate and strategic meetings asked for more hybrid replacements. Is that something that you're going to do, or Yeah?
We look, so when vehicles, they need to be fit for purpose. So off-road, outdoor workforce generally will have a ute and appropriate things on that. But when we are looking at more sort of corporate-y, pool car type arrangements, then we will look at the best opportunity. So EV is something that we do use. Certainly in our pool vehicles for corporate, we do have them. So absolutely, they are more expensive.
Yeah. Sharks are really expensive, Rosie. I haven't seen you driving yours yet. Thank you.
Baby shark.
The baby shark.
It doesn't look like it, but it gets used like one.
Yeah.
Councillor Foley.
Oh, thanks, Chair. Just the health and safety, the trend isn't going the right way, and there's a particular jump this quarter. Is that, you mentioned workload being a factor, but also that you've started recording non-work incidents. So is that what's having the biggest impact there?
So so the well-being of the staff is really important, and we do track and monitor not who and how, but more the outcomes of EAP sessions, just in terms of is it work-related or not. And so that's how we get a sense of, how much more we need to put in support around internal staff. Where we are seeing an increase, however, though, so that's come through in the EAP, is there's a lot more verbal, more recently, a lot of verbal aggression shown at our front desk counters or on site in remote areas. We tap into that. The staff are getting really good at recording things now, so we're generally seeing an increase of near misses and or verbal aggression. There is one incident, however, in the health and safety space where, and this went through the Risk and Audit Committee meeting recently, where we had a near miss of a staff member in a very remote location who was allergic to bee stings, had a bee sting, and our InReach device and our third-party provider that manages events and escalation pathways, that didn't happen in the way in which should have. And so there is and has been a bit of work around escalation paths, fit for purpose, InReach devices, what do we need to do, have a think about cell phone coverage, etc. So near miss, but one that we can learn from certainly and improve.
So McIntosh.
I was just having trouble reconciling the human resources numbers on page 7. So it shows an uptick in the March quarter, but I thought that correlated with an increase in the positions we have open. So am I right that there's something like 70 positions open at the moment?
Vacancies?
Yeah. Vacancies, yes, yeah.
I'm going to have to come back to you on why that increase has happened. Sorry, Councillor McIntosh, I don't know off the top of my head. It could well be NIWI-related staff that we're taking on short-term across the road. Those roles tend not to be on hold because of the priority piece of work that is. We will not put them on hold. However, you're right, it doesn't quite make sense, so I'll get to come back to you, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. We asked last quarter around civil defence emergency management reporting. I think it was Neil and I that made the point that it was a place that we could see a little bit more of what was going on. So thank you for including it. It's blue though, no report available for the CEDM group. So just following up on that, and I think it's really great to see it there. It's a way we can have a touch point that we often complain we can't. I'd like to know why it didn't happen, but can we make sure it does for next quarter, please?
It would be good to have a response to that, but my perception is that it's just a matter of staging. We've got Shane Briggs on now, and we would fully expect that to be, whilst recognising that primarily it's the mayors and chairs to which DNM reports, but recognising our need, our desire for better information, more transparency. Yep. expect to see that filled next time.
The team are actively working on that
Yeah.
with Katrina. So
Fantastic. Councillor Williams, then Councillor Curtin.
I think,
Oh, no, I was just going to ask Katrina if she had an update on how that would be reported. So what will we see in the performance report?
Yeah.
Great.
Well, as they're working on it.
Okay, so
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I am very new in this space, so please forgive me if I fumble my way through. Ultimately, Shane Briggs, your controller, and I are going to be working together to have a dashboard reporting on the transformation strategy, primarily about the implementation of that, and you will be able to see milestones of how that has been progressed. And we'll also have the reporting that's similar to the reporting that you see for the rest of the business.
Thank you.
Nice and clear. So, well played. So who do we have next? We had Councillor Williams and then, Councillor Williams next.
Yeah, thank you. Look, question for the CEO, resignations and exit interviews. It says, while exit survey feedback was limited, the responses we did receive suggested generally had a positive view, etc. Two-part question. One, is this report sugarcoating the pill in any way? And two, do we not have a consistent exit interview policy so that any negative responses are actually determined and fed through to us?
I will have to check on what the policy says. I don't know off the top of my head. We offer, as I understand, everybody the opportunity who leaves to do an exit interviews, but it's a voluntary process. Some people choose to take that up, and some people don't. If there are any significant trends coming out of that, that no doubt will come to ELT. But no, there's no sugarcoating in the report. That's good.
Well, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just want to, perhaps this is a question for either Katrina and or Richard, and it's in the Integrated Catchment Management financials. That's on page 26. We've got a number there where we're $977 million underspend on environmental science. I just wonder, it's a bit murky to me. Can you tell us whether that relates to the environmental science charges? Nothing to do with that? No link at all? The reason I raise it is that if it did, and the implications are for next year's science charge setting, so there's no connection between the two.
Kia ora. To the point, no, there's no connection to the science charges. It actually relates to the current state of the research work around nature-based solutions.
So supplementary to that, Mr. Chair, given that, and I think you relate the underspend to staff vacancies. I think you've got 4 vacancies there. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is that problematic, and should, in fact, we should be recognising that with an orange sticker on that item, given the importance of it?
So the vacancies have since been filled. So the science team are at capacity at the moment, and so this actually just relates to timing, really, of where we've got to.
Would it be more appropriate, given what the report says, to have flagged that as an issue, as an orange flag instead of a green flag?
Yes.
perhaps while Richard's in the hot seat, Richard, can I ask you a question around environmental information and just trying to understand perhaps the pressures that are in that team, and this in the context of environmental information being the core of our state of environment monitoring, and so and that is built around a really good data sets over extended periods of time. So if those are at risk, then we ought, as governors, to know about that and address that. It appears to me, from what's written, that the collection is happening, processing may be delayed, but that it is fragile. Could you elaborate, please?
Thank you for the opportunity. That is part of a piece of work at the moment in terms of actually understanding that connection. So I'm having a deep dive into the environmental information to actually understand what that connection is, because it does seem, whilst we're collecting the data and then going through and what that analysis means, and also the connection into environmental science. So there is a direct link into the data collection, the analysis of the data, and then how it actually informs the science work. So that is actually part of a piece of work at the moment to fully understand that. We have actually made some recent capacity improvements in that area to ensure that the integrity of the data collection remains. However, understanding that connection through is the next piece of the puzzle.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rowley.
Chair. Get a lot of comfort from reading these reports, don't you? Because there's lots of green lights and what have you. But I just wanted to highlight on page 29 the asset management financials. Lovely green light there. And also preface what I'm going to say with what a fantastic job that the asset management team have been doing in resetting the way the Whitehall Bar is managed and their approach to that, but also the considerable work that they've done in that part of the river. My understanding is that there will be ongoing costs in that area as we step up our level of service for the folk of Wairoa, and I absolutely endorse that that's the right thing to do. However, the green light here that I'm gaining comfort from is actually a bit of a swings and roundabouts, or seesaw effect, with the underspends, which are temporary, actually mostly due to timing, it seems, from the IRG and the work on the NEWI projects being a little bit delayed from what was expected. So, councillors, I just want to draw your attention that the amount that's sitting in there in those control works, I think I don't have the exact figures to hand, but I recall it's something like 4 times the cost we are spending currently at the Wairoa River mouth, which I absolutely endorse as appropriate. However, this is where it's going to sit, and whilst we've got a green light, there's stuff going on here that we probably need to be well ahead of as far as how we're proportioning the costs of that as we go into next year's. That wasn't a question, I don't think. So apologies, Chair.
I'm guilty myself. I'm not going to pull you up on it.
You could ask, was that a question, Mr. Chair? And then you got a question.
Yeah, apologies, it was more of a rant.
Yeah,
it just really strikes me. So perhaps would you like
Chief
to speak
Executive
to
is going to provide some comment to your non-question.
Agree with your question, Councillor. It's one of those situations where operationally we can't afford not to take the required action, but in the longer term, there's going to be a question for council, I think, as to how does it want to rate for those kind of services. And
targeted rate.
That's probably a question coming for the next annual plan. But in the meantime, and I think the Senior Council are really keen that we make sure we're as prepared for any weather event as we can be.
Absolutely, and I think I recall at the lead in that area, Chris Dolly, saying that there, for any community who might be watching this, that there is no expense spared when a job needs doing around a river mouth, the job gets done. And it's our job to sort out how it gets paid for in retrospect, and there is a residual fund to cover those costs. But this might be a slight shift in the way that that's proportioned.
Agreed, and I think later this week we're likely to see the next stage of the Wairoa bar management process unfold, having talked to Wairoa District Council and Tātou Tātou Te Wairoa, and that will look to lower the crest of that bar over around about 100 metre stretch, which essentially provides a point at which a second mouth becomes more easy. It happens more easily in the event of a flood. So that work is programmed to get underway very soon. Thank you. Chair, Councillor Williams and then Councillor Van Beek.
I was going to leave this for deliberations, which is the place where we make observations and comments. So,
but I've opened.
But I've figured out there's actually a question that might usefully follow from what I'm wanting to say, and it's an issue we touched on in some discussion yesterday about the challenges we've got resource-wise for our drainage network that are highlighted on page 16. In just about every community meeting you go to, and this happened at Whirinaki last night, the question they have, regardless of what you want to talk about, is can you clear my drain, please, so I can sleep at night? And I think Councillor Van Beek raised this yesterday as well. And so I guess the comment is, can we please be upfront to our communities? If we've got a funding shortfall, that means because people are saying don't increase our rates, that means we can't clean drains in accordance with our KPI, which is that 80% of our drainage infrastructure is maintained or whatever. Let's be totally upfront of that. And could we get a paper on what the shortfall in the budget is, and what it would cost in rating terms for perhaps next year's annual plan or wherever we're at, to address that problem, because it's in a lot of people's minds. So that was the comment, and is there a response to the question bit about getting a paper?
Happy to take that away and talk to Mr. Dolly. I'm sure we can get a paper or the right set of information to councillors. I think the other issue that we're facing around drains is essentially being the ongoing reactivation of silt post the cyclone.
Yes, I understand that.
And there will need to be a paper come to council for you to consider as to whether you want to invest in that being cleared further. Yep. So that will be on the way. That as part of a kind of outstanding set of cyclone remedial action. There's about $16 million worth of potential work to do.
If that point could be noted in the minutes so we can track that as a follow-up next time, that'd be great. Thank you.
Councillor Van Beek.
Great, excellent. Depending on what financial year you follow, on page 27, Wairoa and Pakowhai, which I'm champion of, Pakowhai, are forecast to begin in Q4. Does that mean that at the end of this year, rather than financial year, that actually will happen? And while I've got the microphone, I went yesterday to the Whirinaki meeting, and which was really well run by our staff and opened by their champion, which is, now you can raise your arms, Councillor Williamson. He did really well, and it was really well received by the community when you actually come up with really good information, very clear PowerPoint, and they thanked our council for the work that we have done. So well done, Councillor Williams and staff.
Yeah.
So the staff, my question is, because there has to be a question in here, of course, Q4 is the end of this year, not financial year, correct?
End of this. It looks like calendar year. I might have to clarify that, Mr. Dolly. I'll come back to you.
Well, the good news is that Andrew Casely indicates that we may be starting Whirinaki
yes,
this end of the year.
Yep.
Which is good news.
Laura.
My question is around open spaces underspent, particularly the cycleway maintenance. Is it going to be maintained, the current tracks you have, rather than focusing on the Hawi Park project, given that it was only finalised in April. So that underspend in terms of the cycling track, given I live in Bridge Palm, there's a big fat cycle track there that hasn't had another dump of limestone since it was put in.
I'll get some more detail from Mr. Dolly and come back to you if that suits. Broadly, there's no plan to close any part of the cycle trail network, but council did reduce open spaces funding as part of the annual plan process to make some savings. So there's been a reduction in the maintenance budgets across all of the open spaces, but nothing's been closed.
Thank you.
But there's good news in that space as well. There are volunteer groups that actually are going to take on certain sections of those cycleways, so they will be maintained. And those groups were originally part of the inception of cycleways, and so they're actually going to carry on the banner again going forward. That's the discussion that's happening right now. So,
because it tends to be our only footpath. That's all.
Fantastic.
AZ.
True. Look, I also note, thank you, Laura, for bringing that up, that the report actually records that part of the problem is delay in MB funding. So it would be nice to have clarification about whether it's the constraint is with us financially or MB dragging its heels.
Yeah.
Councillor Lambert.
Yeah, just one along the same lines as Councillor Williams is the one about the drain clearing and that. And I know in the report it says some drain excavations are still outstanding due to budget limitations, and that's definitely true in Wairau. And one of them is the Pyro scheme. In the last few months, I guess funding was made available through the SILT fund, which is fine, and a lot of these projects follow over a few years, and what seems to have been a bit adrift is that somehow Wairau Council got the hold of the funding and put it in for the scheme. They contracted them straight to QRS, but then there was no actual regional council oversight, so that they followed the proper works and waterways protocols, and as a result, they were cleaning out the drains without care of how deep they should be going, containing within the walls of the drain themselves, and actually killing quite a lot of eels. So, and it's our policies are pretty clear, but and there's a few things that have slipped by, and that is who to contact in their bed when they're cleaning the drains there. It should be pretty. I mean, it's a scheme we've had for years, and there's no actual format on who to contact. And I would say that it's one of the things we noticed talking to a couple of people is that they feel that Tato should have been part of the mailing list. They don't do the funding and stuff, but they should be the one point of contact due to the treaty settlement, if not anything else, let alone being a tripartite partner. So, yeah. So a lot of those probably should be checked out.
Yep, no, thank you. Happy to take that feedback and I'll pass that on. Thank you, Chief Executive. So I think that brings us to the end of questions. Again, look, I think to have had a little bit extra time to go through that has been valuable. Sometimes we rush through these things a little bit, but they are very information dense and a very useful tool for interrogating the organisation and its leadership. So thank you for your attention. So I just need a mover and a seconder to receive a note of paper. Councillor Williams and Councillor Van Beek, would you like to speak to it?
Just very briefly, I might have sounded like a pointed question before, but I think we've all been caught by surprise as governors when things have been cryptically coded with words like challenges and things like that, and then you probe it or you hear from your community it's more than a challenge, there's a major storm somewhere. And so, look, thank you for the information in this paper, but just as a general cultural point, can we encourage, if there is an issue, don't hide it from us. Our only line of sight into this organisation is the information we get. We can't be accountable to our communities if we don't understand issues and problems or challenges that are being faced at operational level. So please be, I'm sure you are, as revealing as you can as to the true nature of what you're dealing with in your reporting to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you once again for the report. I think it's about almost 6 years ago now that we actually looked at implementing this this type of reporting, and I do see that the wording is starting to increase, which is actually really good, gives oversight. But I totally agree with my fellow councillor that first off, when issues arrive, like to know about them so we can assist you in the community as well and not just see them as quarterly reports. So thank you very much for the work done. It's really great. Gives a lot of insight.
Thank you. All right, so we'll go to vote. All those in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Well, that's pretty much the end of business. Peter, can I ask you to lead us out?
Kara kia koutou, kia tau, kia tātou.
Te atua tō tātou a reki a ihu karaiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga teitanga ki te wairua tapu, ake, 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 amen.